Then one night, a terrified boy appeared at a gas station miles away from the Holloway home. He was only 8 years old, barefoot, shaking, and clutching a scrap of paper with a phone number scrawled on it. When police arrived, he told them something no one wanted to believe. "They're not my brothers and sisters," he said through tears. "She sells us. She says we're worth more than gold." The officer who took the statement later said he felt his stomach drop. Margaret Holloway wasn't a saint. She wasn't an angel. She was running a child-selling operation out of her farmhouse, and 12 children had already vanished without a trace. The boy's testimony cracked open a nightmare. Detectives moved quickly, interviewing former caseworkers, teachers, and neighbors. What they found was a chilling pattern. Over the years, Margaret Holloway had taken in 12 foster and adopted children, but only 5 were currently accounted for. 7 were simply gone. When asked, Margaret offered smooth explanations. Some, she said, had been reunited with distant relatives. Others had been sent to live with family friends. She even claimed 2 had run away. But when investigators pressed her for names, addresses, or paperwork, everything fell apart. None of her stories matched official records. No relatives, no family friends, no runaway reports. Just vanished children. Her neighbors began to recall moments that once seemed odd but now felt sinister. One woman said she often saw strange cars pulling into the Holloway driveway late at night, black SUVs, out-of-state plates, men in suits who never stayed long. Another remembered that Margaret always seemed to have extra cash. Despite not working, she bought new appliances, remodeled her kitchen, and wore expensive jewelry. Even Margaret's church, where she was a respected volunteer, noticed inconsistencies. She'd bring different children to Sunday service, then suddenly stop showing up with them altogether. When asked, she would laugh and say, "Oh, they're with a new family now. I'm just doing God's work." But the most damning piece of evidence came from Margaret's computer. Forensic experts found encrypted emails, deleted photos, and contact lists with names tied to suspected human trafficking rings overseas. The amounts listed in her correspondence were staggering. Children priced between 25, 0, and 60, 0 each, described in chilling, dehumanizing terms. As the pieces fell together, detectives realized they weren't dealing with a case of neglect or paperwork errors. Margaret Holloway wasn't just failing as a foster parent, she was profiting off the very children she was supposed to protect. And now, with 7 children unaccounted for, the race was on to find out whether any of them were still alive. The search for the missing children became a frantic, citywide operation. Flyers plastered lampposts, Amber Alerts spread across state lines, and FBI agents joined local detectives in what was now officially a human trafficking investigation. Margaret Holloway, meanwhile, maintained her mask of innocence. In her first police interview, she spoke softly, almost condescendingly, as though the detectives questioning her were children themselves. "I've loved every single one of those kids," she said. "If some of them ended up with better opportunities, isn't that what fostering is all about?" But her calm demeanor cracked when agents showed her the recovered emails. One message, dated just 6 months earlier, listed the details of a 5-year-old girl with the subject line, "Healthy, adaptable, available soon." Beneath it was a payment confirmation for 40-0. Margaret went silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. Investigators then turned to the children still in her home. The 5 who remained were placed into protective custody, and their statements painted a horrifying picture. One little girl said Margaret would line them up, take photos, and tell them to smile for the nice people. Another recalled hearing Margaret on the phone saying, "He'll pay extra for this one." The most chilling testimony came from the boy who had escaped. He described how Margaret told the children they were special merchandise and that she was their only chance at a better life. He said new kids would arrive, stay for a few weeks, and then be gone, taken away in the middle of the night by strangers. The FBI began connecting the dots. They traced financial transfers in Margaret's accounts to offshore banks known for laundering money for organized crime. They also identified several of the vehicles spotted at her farmhouse. One SUV was linked to a suspected trafficker already under federal investigation. It was no longer just about Margaret. She wasn't acting alone. She was the friendly face, the trusted foster mother, the respected church volunteer. But behind her stood a network willing to buy and sell children like commodities. And the deeper investigators dug, the clearer it became. The 7 missing children might be spread across multiple states, or worse, already overseas. Every hour mattered. And as agents closed in, they realized Margaret Holloway might have one final secret that could blow the entire case wide open. That secret came out in Margaret's second interrogation. Agents pressed harder this time, showing her photos of the missing children, laying the evidence across the table, emails, payment records, surveillance stills of the SUVs. For hours, she refused to crack, repeating the same phrases over and over. I gave them better lives. They're safe now. You don't understand the system. But then, one agent leaned in and asked a question no one had dared to yet. Margaret, where's the money? Her eyes flickered. That was the opening. A forensic accountant had already discovered that more than 400 had disappeared from Margaret's accounts in the past year alone. But instead of being withdrawn in cash or wired overseas, large chunks had been funneled into shell companies, companies that, on paper, looked like charities for child welfare. Under pressure, Margaret finally spoke. Not with guilt, not with remorse, but with pride. You think I'm some kind of monster, she hissed. But I did what no one else had the courage to do. The state doesn't care about those children. They would have grown up broken, addicted, in jail. I found people who wanted them, people who would pay to take care of them. I didn't sell them. I placed them where they'd be valued. Where to that? Her words made even the veteran detectives shift uncomfortably. She wasn't confessing, she was justifying. And then she dropped the real bombshell. She hadn't just sold children locally. She had connections overseas. Wealthy couples, individuals with money and power, people who could give these kids anything they wanted. According to Margaret, some of the children were already out of the country. The FBI realized the case was even bigger than they feared. Margaret wasn't just a greedy foster mother exploiting the system. She was a recruiter, one cog in an international trafficking ring that spanned borders. With that revelation, agents had to make a choice. Pursue Margaret's network quietly to rescue the missing kids, or go public with the charges and risk tipping off her buyers. Either way, time was running out. And Margaret Holloway, the woman once hailed as a hero, now sat in her cell, smiling faintly as if she still held all the cards. The trial that followed was unlike anything the town or the country had ever seen. The woman once celebrated as a saintly foster mother now stood accused of human trafficking, child endangerment, and conspiracy with an international crime network. Prosecutors presented her not as a misguided parent, but as a calculating profiteer who turned children into merchandise. Jurors sat in stunned silence as evidence was shown. Emails detailing inventory, receipts for wire transfers labeled with children's initials, photos Margaret herself had taken of the kids dressed up, posed like catalog models. The images were gut-wrenching, but the most powerful testimony came from the children who had survived her house. In small, trembling voices, they described being told to line up for strangers, being woken in the middle of the night, being told by Margaret that good kids get chosen faster. One girl admitted she prayed every night not to be picked. Another said he thought if he misbehaved badly enough, Margaret would never sell him. When the boy who had escaped took the stand, the courtroom wept. She said we were worth more than gold, he whispered, but she never treated us like kids. We were like things. Margaret's defense tried to paint her as a victim of the broken foster system, an overwhelmed woman manipulated by dangerous traffickers. But the prosecution revealed she wasn't just complicit. She was profiting. Nearly $500,000 traced directly to her accounts. Jewelry, vacations, home renovations, all funded by the sale of children she had promised to protect. And then came the most shocking revelation. Investigators testified that Margaret had already arranged another placement before she was arrested. An infant, just 6 months old, had been scheduled to be picked up the week after police raided her home. That baby, they said, would likely have vanished forever, if not for the boy who escaped. The gallery gasped. Some jurors openly cried. The image of a smiling woman who called herself Mother Margaret was gone forever, replaced by the truth. She wasn't a savior. She was a broker in one of the darkest trades imaginable. And as the trial neared its end, the only question that remained was whether she would spend the rest of her life in prison, or if, like so many times before, she'd find a way to slip through the cracks of the system she had exploited so well. The verdict came down on a packed Friday afternoon. The courthouse was overflowing journalists, victims' advocates, neighbors who once praised her, all waiting to hear if Margaret Holloway would finally be held accountable. The jury foreman stood, voice trembling but firm. Guilty, on all counts. Gasps. It started as a story that seemed heartwarming, the kind that local news stations loved to cover. Margaret Holloway was a 52-year-old widow living in a quiet Midwestern town. She had a wide smile, a gentle voice, and a reputation for generosity. Neighbors called her Mother Margaret. She baked cookies for church fundraisers, organized toy drives at Christmas, and spoke passionately about giving children a safe home. Over the course of 5 years, she adopted and fostered 12 children. Most were under the age of 10, kids who had bounced from home to home in the state's overwhelmed foster system. Social workers praised her. The local paper even ran a story calling her an angel among us. Photographs showed Margaret sitting on her porch, children clustered around her, their small hands clutching teddy bears. But behind the cheerful smiles and the picture-perfect image, something sinister was happening inside the Holloway home. The children weren't being saved. They were being groomed, photographed, and sold. It began with small suspicions. Teachers noticed foster kids placed with Margaret would suddenly disappear from school records, often with vague excuses. Moved out of state, placed with relatives. Social workers who tried to follow up were given evasive answers. Neighbors, once charmed by Margaret's kindness, whispered about the kids they hadn't seen in weeks, swept the room, followed by tears of relief from child welfare workers who had long suspected something was wrong but never had proof. Margaret Holloway, the woman once paraded as an angel of foster care, was sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. The judge's words cut through the silence. You exploited the innocent for greed. You betrayed every oath of humanity. You will never again see freedom. But even in chains, Margaret showed no remorse. She stared at the families in the gallery and said coldly, "You should thank me. I gave those children futures you never could." Her words sent shivers through the courtroom. After sentencing, the FBI held a press conference. They revealed that of the 12 children connected to Margaret, 5 were rescued alive and placed in safe custody. Tragically, 7 remained unaccounted for. Some evidence suggested they had been trafficked overseas, their identities erased. International investigations were ongoing, but officials admitted that finding them would be like chasing ghosts. The community was left shattered. The Holloway farmhouse was torn down, the land left empty, a scar that neighbors said felt cursed. Churches that once celebrated Margaret's saintly work held vigils instead, praying for the lost children whose names might never be known again. And yet, despite her conviction, Margaret remained a symbol of something larger and more terrifying. How easily trust can be weaponized. She had smiled, baked cookies, read bedtime stories, and all the while, she was selling children like property. In the end, the boy who escaped became the case's only true hero. Without him, the operation might have continued for years. His words, "She said we were worth more than gold," echoed across news broadcasts, a haunting reminder of how close 12 children came to being erased forever. Margaret Holloway will die in prison. But for the families of the missing, and for the children who will never be found, the nightmare she created will never fully end.